The eyes in the cage, the zoo was one of the biggest in the galaxy. People from many different planets came to see strange animals and rare creatures. But hidden in the far back of the zoo, behind the tall glass cages, there was one being that most visitors ignored. She was not big or scary. She didn't have sharp teeth or powerful claws. She was just quiet. She looked like a girl, but not from Earth. Her skin was soft silver, and her long hair was blue like the night sky. Her arms were thin, and she wore a simple cloth around her. But her most unusual feature was her eyes. They were large, glowing, and always filled with sadness. No one ever stopped to look at her for long. They thought she was boring. She never screamed or jumped. She just sat in a corner, head down, still like a statue. One day, a human man named Jacob visited the zoo. He was not a rich man. He worked as a ship repairman and lived a quiet life. But that day, something made him take a different path through the zoo. He passed cages of wild beasts and dangerous monsters, but none caught his attention. Then he reached the back corner. And there she was, the alien girl. Jacob stopped. He didn't know why. She wasn't moving. She wasn't making a sound. But when he looked into her eyes, something inside him felt strange. Her eyes didn't look like a monster's. They didn't look wild or violent. They looked scared. They looked like the eyes of a child who had lost her way. Like a kitten searching for its mother. Jacob stood there for a long time. Other people passed by, laughing and pointing at louder, more exciting creatures. But Jacob didn't move. He just kept looking at her. And she, for the first time, slowly raised her head and looked back at him. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. But something passed between them. A feeling. A message without words. She wasn't a beast. She wasn't dangerous. She was alone. He read the label on her cage. It said, "Unknown species, female, age, unknown, status, dangerous, do not touch." But she didn't look dangerous at all. Her hands were folded on her lap. Her body was still. Only her eyes moved, always watching, always waiting. Jacob felt something deep in his chest. He had seen fear in machines, panic in people during accidents. But this was something different. This was sadness. Pure, deep sadness. Jacob turned to one of the zoo workers nearby and asked, "How long has she been here?" The worker shrugged. "A few years, maybe more. No one knows where she came from. She was found in a broken pod drifting in space. The boss thought she'd make a good display, but she's boring. Doesn't do much. Does anyone talk to her?" Jacob asked. "Why would they? She's just there. Doesn't understand us. Doesn't speak. People like the big wild ones better." Jacob looked back at her. He couldn't walk away. It didn't feel right. He came again the next day and the next. Every day after his work, he would visit the same cage. He didn't bring food or gifts. He just stood there and spoke softly. He didn't know if she understood him. But sometimes she blinked slowly. Sometimes she tilted her head just a little. Small things. But to Jacob, they meant everything. He started to call her Kitten Eyes. It was silly, but it felt right. She reminded him of a lost animal, not a monster. She never showed anger or fear. Just quiet watching. One evening, as the zoo was about to close, Jacob stood in front of her again. The other cages were empty now. Visitors had gone home. The lights were dim. Then something happened. She moved. Not much, just her hand. She pointed to the dirt inside her cage. And there, Jacob saw it. A small pattern made with her finger. It looked like lines and circles, not random. Like a message. Jacob knelt down and stared. The lines repeated, again and again. He quickly took a picture with his device. His heart beat fast. Was she trying to communicate? As the night guard came and asked Jacob to leave, he nodded slowly and walked away. But his mind was racing. This wasn't just a creature. This wasn't just a display. She was alive. She had thoughts. She had hope. And Jacob knew one thing for sure now: those kitten eyes were not empty. They were trying to speak. And he would be the one to listen. That night, Jacob didn't sleep. Something had begun. Something no one else could see. But Jacob saw it clearly in her eyes. The cage might be locked, but her soul was not. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to set her free. Why is she here? Jacob's mind couldn't rest. Even after he left the zoo, her eyes followed him in his thoughts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her sitting in that cage, silent, small, and watching him. The world kept moving outside, but inside his heart, a storm had started. That alien girl wasn't just a strange creature from another world. She was someone, and she needed help. He began asking questions. First, he searched online through the zoo's official records, but there was almost nothing about her. Just one short entry: female alien. Found drifting near Sector 12. Classed nonverbal. No known homeworld. Caged under Directive 88. Nothing more. No name. No origin. No reason for being labeled dangerous. Jacob found this hard to believe. He had seen wild alien beasts before, creatures that roared, bit, or broke their cages. But this girl had not even moved until the day he noticed her. There were no attacks, no screams, only quiet eyes and stillness. So why had they locked her up like that? Why was she treated like a threat? He decided to return to the zoo not as a visitor, but with a purpose. Over the next few days, Jacob visited again and again. He took quiet notes. He watched the guards, the feeding times, the way her cage was cleaned. No one ever entered the cage. They used machines to drop food from the top. They never spoke to her. They never even looked at her for more than a second. She was just there, forgotten. One afternoon, Jacob brought a notebook with him. He sat on the bench across from her cage. She looked at him again. This time, he smiled gently and opened his notebook. He showed her the pictures he had copied, the strange symbols she had drawn in the dirt. Her eyes widened. She understood. Slowly, very slowly, she moved her finger again. She drew the same symbol on the glass. Over and over, Jacob recognized it. It was the same shape from before. He sent the photo to an old friend, Dr. Laura Helms, who worked in alien linguistics. She was a professor at a space academy and had helped translate many rare languages before. Jacob simply asked her, "Is this language?" Later that night, her reply came, "No known match." But it's a clear message. Looks like it repeats. A feeling or idea. Possibly a plea like help or home. Very emotional. Jacob stared at the message again. He could feel it now. It wasn't just random drawing. It was a cry, not from an animal, but from a mind. From a soul. Still, no one else cared. People passed by her cage like it was empty. Children laughed. Adults pointed at bigger, louder beasts. But only Jacob saw the truth. One evening, a group of new guards walked by. They were laughing about something. One of them said, "That silent freak still alive? I thought she would stop eating by now." Another replied, "Doesn't matter. She's just display. No value unless she moves." Jacob's hands tightened into fists. He wanted to shout at them, but he stayed silent. He knew he had to think smart. If he made noise, they would block him. He had to be careful. He began studying Directive 88. It was a law used to cage dangerous beings without a trial, but there was a catch. The law only applied if the creature showed clear violence or threat. Jacob had not seen any. He needed proof that she was not dangerous. Proof that she could think, feel, and understand. But how could he do that? The answer came from the girl herself. One morning, Jacob arrived earlier than usual. The moment he stood in front of her cage, she pressed her hand gently on the glass. Then she pointed to her chest, then to him, then drew a tiny heart in the dirt. Jacob froze. Was she saying she trusted him? That she felt something? He copied the same gesture. Chest, point to her. Then the small heart in the dirt for the first time. Her lips moved, just a little, not a full word. Just a small breath of sound. But it was the beginning. Jacob's heart beat faster. This was not just a creature in a cage. This was someone who had waited a long time for someone to see her. To hear her. To believe her. And now, Jacob knew what he had to do. He didn't know how. Yet, he didn't know when. But he would find a way to bring her out of that cage. She didn't belong behind glass. She wasn't an animal. She wasn't a display. She was a prisoner of silence. And Jacob was the only one listening. A message in the dirt. Jacob arrived early again, but something was different this time. As he walked toward her cage, his steps slowed. The zoo was still quiet, not many people yet, but something in the air felt heavier. A strange tension. The alien girl, whom he now called Kitten Eyes in his heart, was already sitting upright. Waiting, that was new. She had always stayed curled up, still and quiet, unless he was near. But now she sat tall, her eyes searching, focused on him. As he stepped closer, she looked straight into his eyes and then pointed to the floor inside her cage. Jacob followed her movement and saw it. There, in the dirt near her feet, she had drawn again. But this time it was not one symbol. It was many. Carefully made shapes linked together in a line. Circles, lines, curves, some repeated. Some were new. It looked like a sentence, a message. Not something wild or random, but organized, thoughtful. Jacob's heart jumped. She had waited until she knew someone would return, until she felt safe enough to try again, until someone showed they cared enough to listen. That someone was him. He took a picture of the symbols and uploaded it instantly. This time, he didn't just send it to Dr. Laura Helms. He posted it in a secret online forum where humans and alien scholars shared unknown writings. The title of his post was simple: Message from a Caged Girl. An hour later, the replies came flooding in. One user said, "The repeated shapes mean something emotional, maybe sorrow." Another claimed, "This is like a plea. The pattern suggests she's begging for help." But then Dr. Helms herself replied privately to Jacob. Her message was short but powerful. She's telling a story. These aren't just words. These are her memories. Jacob stared at the symbols again. A chill went down his spine. She was not only trying to speak, she was trying to tell someone what happened to her. Later that evening, he returned to the cage. The zoo was louder now, and people moved past quickly, not noticing the quiet alien girl or the man who stood staring at her with deep concern. Jacob took out a small notebook and copied her symbols by hand. She watched him closely. When he finished, she pointed to one shape near the end and placed her palm on her chest. Then she pointed to another symbol that looked broken, and her eyes filled with sadness. Jacob didn't need translation for that part. She had been hurt. She had lost something. Maybe her home. Maybe her family. Maybe everything. And now she had only this cage. The next day, something strange happened. 2 guards stood nearby while Jacob visited. They whispered to each other and kept glancing his way. One walked off and the other approached Jacob with a fake smile. "You've been coming here a lot," the guard said. "Why?" Jacob kept calm. "I'm just interested in her." "She's not a pet," the guard said, his tone a little colder. "She doesn't talk, she doesn't think. Don't waste your time." Jacob wanted to yell, "You're wrong." But instead, he nodded and walked away. He didn't want to cause trouble yet, but inside, he burned with anger. That night, Jacob sat at his desk staring at the symbols again. He started matching each shape to emotions. He saw patterns, pain, cold, fear, then something new. A shape he hadn't noticed before. It looked like two small hands touching. Could it mean trust? The next day, he showed her the notebook again and pointed to that symbol. Then he gently placed his own hand on the glass dot. To his shock, she raised her hand and pressed it against the glass from the inside. Matching his palm through the thick barrier dot, it was a silent connection. No words, no sounds. But it said everything. She trusted him now. She believed he could help. And Jacob, deep in his heart, knew one thing. He had to act. She wasn't just drawing messages anymore. She was reaching out, trusting him, risking what little strength she had left to try and be understood. And Jacob understood. This was more than just saving a girl from a cage. This was about proving she was more than what they said she was. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't dumb. She was intelligent, emotional, and full of stories no one had ever listened to. But Jacob was listening now, and he would not stop. Not until her message reached the world. Not until she was free. The human breaks the rule. Jacob knew he couldn't wait any longer. Every day he visited her, the fear grew stronger. Not from her, but from the zoo itself. The way guards looked at him. The way her cage was kept. The way no one cared if she lived or died. Something was wrong, and Jacob could feel it. One evening, he overheard a short conversation between two guards near the back hallway. "They're thinking of moving her," one whispered. "To storage section 9. Boss says she's useless now." Jacob's stomach dropped. Storage section 9 was where the zoo sent old animals, ones they didn't want to feed anymore. No visitors were allowed there. No return ever happened from that place. He couldn't let that happen. That night, Jacob sat in his small apartment, staring at his work tools. He wasn't a hero. He was just a mechanic. But he knew how to open locked doors. He knew how systems worked. He also knew how to be quiet. He made a plan. The next evening, Jacob walked into the zoo not as a visitor, but as a worker. He wore his repair uniform and carried a standard maintenance bag. No one stopped him. He had once fixed power lines in the zoo and still had his old ID. The cameras didn't blink at him. He moved past the visitors, past the crowds, straight toward her cage. She was already waiting. Their eyes met. She knew. Jacob walked slowly to the control panel beside the cage. His hands shook, but he worked quickly. He disabled the alert sound, overrode the lock, and quietly slid open the cage door. She didn't move at first. She just looked at him, as if asking, "Is this real?" Jacob reached out his hand, and she stood up. For the first time in front of him, she walked. Her steps were soft and careful, but she didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his dot. She was smaller than he expected. Fragile, cold. But her fingers gripped his tightly. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, but just as they turned to leave, the cage alarm blinked red. Silent alert. No sound. But the system had noticed an open door. The countdown had begun. Soon the guards would know. Soon the cameras would catch up. Jacob pulled her behind him and moved fast. He had memorized the hallway paths. There was an old maintenance tunnel behind the reptile sector. If they reached it in time, they could escape the inner area without being seen. They ran. Her breathing was light but shaky. She was weak from years of cold and silence, but her feet kept moving. Jacob didn't let go of her hand. Not even once. They turned sharp corners, past supply rooms, dodged cleaning bots. Behind them, heavy boots were starting to echo. Unauthorized. Movement in Sector 7. A voice called over the intercom. Repeat unauthorized movement. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest. He reached the old door and entered the code. It didn't work. One more try. Denied. His fingers moved quickly. He overrode the power switch and forced the panel open with a tool. Sparks flew. The lock clicked. The door slid open. He pulled her through and slammed it shut behind them. Darkness. They stood in a narrow tunnel lit only by small red lights. It smelled of metal and dust. But they were safe, at least for now. She looked at him and tilted her head. Jacob smiled through his fear. "You're free," he whispered, though he wasn't sure she understood the words, but she did something. Unexpected. She touched her fingers to her lips and then to his chest, a gesture of thanks. Then she placed her hand on the wall and closed her eyes. For a moment, she stood still. Then she whispered something in her own language. Jacob didn't understand, but it felt like a promise not to give up. They started moving again. Deeper into the tunnel. Jacob didn't know what would happen next. He didn't have a ship ready. He didn't have a full plan, but he had her. And she had him. For the first time in her life, she wasn't behind glass. For the first time, someone had broken the rule not to control her, not to sell her, but to set her free. The galaxy had called her dangerous, but Jacob had seen something else. A quiet soul with eyes like a lost kitten. And now, that soul was walking beside him, free, trembling, but full of something new. Hope. Escape through fire alarms rang across the entire zoo. Red lights flashed from every corner. Gates slammed shut. Warning messages played through speakers in every language. A dangerous creature had escaped, and every guard was ordered to find her immediately. But Jacob didn't stop running. He held the alien girl's hand tightly. Her skin felt cold, but her grip was strong. She wasn't confused anymore. She understood what was happening, and she was not afraid. Not with him. Behind them, the zoo's main doors were already closing. Heavy steel plates began to lock section by section. If they didn't get out soon, they would be trapped inside. Jacob pulled her toward the maintenance route he had studied days before. It was hidden near the back, through a small gate meant for cleaning bots. It was dusty, unused, and just small enough for a person to crawl through. She didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees and followed him inside. The space was dark and narrow. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping hot steam. Wires sparked from old connections. Jacob coughed as the air grew thick with smoke, but he pushed forward. She crawled behind him, trusting him completely. Suddenly, the tunnel shook. A loud explosion echoed behind them. Jacob looked back. Fire. A pipe had burst. The heat spread quickly, lighting the old dust and wiring. They had seconds to move. Faster. Jacob whispered, more to himself than her. The tunnel bent sharply, leading to a small door at the far end. That door was their way out, a direct exit into the waste yard behind the zoo, where garbage was dumped and old machines thrown away. Jacob reached the door first. It was locked with an old manual bar. He pulled hard. It didn't move. Again. Still. Stuck. The fire was getting closer. The girl crawled beside him and, without warning, placed her hand on the metal bar. Her skin glowed faintly, and within seconds, the lock began to melt. A soft pulse of heat passed through her fingers. The metal bent. The bar dropped. Jacob stared at her. She looked back at him with calm eyes, then pointed at the door. He pushed. It opened. Fresh air. They tumbled out into the cold night, landing in a pile of scrap metal. The zoo's fence was visible just ahead, but the exit was still far. In the shadows, they moved quickly. Jacob kept low, guiding her through piles of trash and broken machines. Somewhere behind them, guards were shouting. She couldn't have gotten far. Jacob's legs ached, but he didn't stop. Neither did she. They reached the edge of the yard where the electric fence stood tall. It sparked with blue energy and hummed with quiet power. Jacob checked his pocket. One device. It was a jammer he had built himself. Small, basic, but strong enough to break one system for 10 seconds. He pressed the button. The fence flickered. Now, he whispered. They ran through, hearts pounding. On the other side, the world opened. Up. They were free. But it wasn't over yet. From the sky, a drone appeared. Its red light locked onto them. A robotic voice shouted, "Stop!" The girl didn't wait. She turned, raised her hand, and made a motion in the air. The drone sparked and dropped like a dead bird. Jacob couldn't believe it. She had power. Real, unknown power. But she had never used it before. Only now to protect him. They kept running until the zoo lights were just a faint glow behind them. Far from the city, far from the cages, finally they reached an old cargo shelter. It had no doors, just broken walls and soft dirt. They collapsed inside. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jacob listened to the sound of her breathing. Slow. Calm. She looked at him and gave the smallest smile. Smiled. The first one he had ever seen on her face. Jacob smiled back. The fire hadn't just burned the tunnel. It had burned the old world. Behind them, the world where she was just a display. Just a thing. That world was gone. Now. She was free. And he had escaped with her, not because she was powerful, or strange, or alien, but because she was someone who mattered. She had suffered in silence. But not anymore. Now, they were together, and the fire they escaped would be nothing compared to the fire that was coming, because Jacob knew they would try to take her back, but he wouldn't let them, not ever. Who she really is. The cold wind blew gently outside the cargo shelter. Jacob sat near a wall, watching the girl as she rested. Her breathing was slow, her eyes closed. For the first time, she looked peaceful, not trapped, not scared. But Jacob had questions, so many questions. Who was she really? Where had she come from? Why did she stay silent for so long? He looked at her hand, the same hand that had melted the door, the same hand that brought down a flying drone with one motion. She had power. Quiet, hidden, but strong. When she opened her eyes, she didn't look confused. She looked calm, like she was finally ready to speak. Jacob didn't say anything. He just waited. Then, slowly, she moved closer to him. Her hand reached for his, and their fingers touched. It wasn't just a touch. It was a connection. Suddenly, Jacob felt something rush through him. Not pain. Not fear. But memories. Images flashed in his mind. A bright sky with 2 suns. A peaceful world full of tall silver trees. A small child running through fields. A family smiling. And then fire. Ships falling from the sky. Screams. Destruction. Soldiers in black armor. Her home burned. Her people taken. Then the worst image. A small pod, closing shut. In silence. She had been taken as a child. Stolen. Locked away. Forgotten. Jacob pulled back, breathing fast. You? You showed me, he whispered. She nodded slowly. Her voice came softly, like music. Name, Carol. Her first words to him. Jacob repeated, Carol. She smiled. A real smile this time. He understood now. She wasn't just some rare alien. She wasn't a zoo animal. She was a survivor of something terrible. Her power, her silence, her sadness, it all made sense. Carol looked up at the stars, through a broken part of the roof. Then she turned to Jacob and said, Mind. Link, only with trust. He nodded. That's why you didn't use it before. She looked down, her voice quiet. Scared. No one saw me. Only you. Jacob felt something deep inside him shift. She had given him something no one else had. Her truth, her pain. her story, and he had given her something no one else dared to offer. Kindness. They sat together in silence for a while. No need for more words, but then Carol stood up and walked toward the exit. Jacob followed. She pointed to the sky again. Others, like me, hiding, scared, caged. Jacob asked, "How many?" She shook her head. "Don't know, but many." Jacob understood what she was saying. Her story wasn't the only one. Others like her had been taken, locked away, treated like animals, and no one cared. No one noticed until now. She looked at Jacob again and said something that hit his heart. "You freed me. I want to help others." Jacob didn't reply right away. His life had been simple before, quiet, normal. But now, everything had changed. He had escaped a high-security zoo, broken laws, and risked his life for a girl he barely knew, but he didn't regret it. Not for a second. He looked at her and nodded. "We'll find them. We'll save them." Carol stepped closer. She placed her palm on his chest again. Then she whispered, "You are my home now." Jacob didn't know what to say, so he said nothing, because sometimes words aren't needed. Sometimes the truth is felt. A girl who had no name, a cage with no key, pain with no voice. Until one human saw her, really saw her. And now, her story was no longer a secret, because Carol wasn't just a girl from a forgotten world. She was a spark. And with Jacob by her side, that spark was about to become a fire no one could ignore. A new life together. The stars above were quiet. But the galaxy was not. News of the escape had already spread. Across stations and ships, a warning was repeated again and again. One human and one dangerous alien are on the run. Photos of Jacob and Carol were shown on screens. They were called criminals, threats, enemies of peace. But Jacob didn't care what the galaxy thought. Because he knew the truth. She wasn't dangerous. She was brave. And now, she wasn't running anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. They traveled in old cargo ships, hiding in shadows, moving from planet to planet. Jacob used his skills to fix broken engines in exchange for fuel or shelter. Carol stayed quiet, learning, watching, feeling the minds of people around her. Not many were kind, but they found a few who listened. One was a pilot with a missing arm. He didn't ask questions. He just gave them a safe room and hot food. Another was a scientist who had once worked in alien studies. She cried when she saw Carol's eyes and whispered, "I thought they were all gone." Slowly, their story began to spread. Not through news channels or big governments, but through whispers, through secret messages, through people who still believed in right and wrong. Carol started speaking more now. Her voice was soft, but her words were strong. "They hide others like me," she said one night. "We must break their cages." Jacob nodded, "And we will." They began searching, going to places where rumors of hidden prisons existed. Carol could feel them. She said the minds of her kind left. Echoes in the air, fear, cold, silence. She could sense it. They found the first one on a mining planet deep underground. 5 aliens locked in metal pods. No food, no light. Just breathing, barely alive. Jacob opened every pod while Carol stood beside them, whispering calm words. One of the aliens, shaking and scared, looked up and said, "Who are you?" Carol answered, "I was like you. Now I'm free." The rescued ones joined them. Then came more. A silent rebellion began not with weapons, but with hope. Jacob's small ship became a moving shelter. Carol became a symbol, not of fear but of strength. People started calling her the caged one who rose, and the human who helped her. They called him the one who saw. But not all were happy. The zoo's owners hired hunters. The guards wanted revenge. Big names in politics called them liars. said the aliens were too dangerous to be free. One hunter almost caught them on a dusty moon. He had them cornered. But when he looked into Carol's eyes, he froze. He dropped his weapon and whispered. "I was told you were a monster," Carol replied. "So was I." He let them go. Jacob realized something then. This fight wasn't just about breaking cages. It was about changing hearts. Carl stood by him now, no longer weak, no longer afraid. Her silver skin glowed in the moonlight. Her blue hair blew gently in the wind. Her eyes no longer looked like a lost kitten. They were full of fire. One night, while resting in an old station far from any star, Carol sat close to Jacob. She looked at him and asked, "Why did you stop that day? Why did you see me?" Jacob didn't answer right away. He thought back to the first moment, the quiet corner of the zoo, the glass wall, the dirt, the drawing, the soft glowing eyes. "I don't know," he finally said. "But when I saw you, something inside me just said, 'She's not what they say she is.'" Carol nodded. Then she reached into a small pouch she kept with her. She pulled out a piece of glass, the same one from her old cage. She handed it to him. "For memory," she said, "of where we began." Jacob took it gently. He smiled. That broken piece of glass once kept her locked in. Now it reminded them of how far they had come. They had no home, no flag, no army, but they had a mission. To free the forgotten. To speak for the silent. To turn fear into freedom. And together, human and alien, they would write a new story, one not kept behind glass, but one told in every corner of the stars.